Okay, guys, I decided that rather than finish off my China commentary, I just wanted to quickly demonstrate the Attila the Hun rush, which a lot of people have been using of late. Kind of a fun map to use this on is actually West versus East, which is a dual, well, 2v2 map that a lot of people like to play. It's two continents kind of split with a river down the middle. At 2v2, there is no deep ocean squares. All on tiny size, there's no deep ocean squares, so it's very easy to get your units over to the other people's side. Most people are thinking, oh, I have to rush frigates, etc., to win this. But I just wanted to show that the Huns, because of this awesome early rush, probably the Celts, probably in the same category, um, can get over there really quickly and damage the opponent before even they have combos. Here I'm a little bit further back from the ocean, which you'll see shortly, or the river, really. Um, so what I'm trying to do, I'm going to go down Liberty to spawn the second settler that I'll need to get a city near the ocean. What I'm going to try and do is maximize production tiles as soon as possible. Probably aiming a city of 4 or 5 um, population, which will get me quite a lot of production here. You'll see that there's horses, there's gems, and there's stone, and the Huns get the bonus of an extra production for horses. Um, Here, as you can see, my partner, who somehow named himself Nothing, I'm not sure how he did that, maybe with square brackets, Civ doesn't really like square brackets, is new to co-op games. So he was going to research on other stuff, but he eventually took my lead, and we started researching the same thing. So I didn't really need mining first up. I would have preferred to go pottery so I could get that granary going quickly, because that increases the amount of production tiles I can use without sacrificing growth. But again, the point of a rush is you don't want to necessarily grow, you just want to have as much production as possible. So if you've got a two population city that you can get 8 production from, that's pretty good, it's better than a five population city that you get 3 production from. Liberty also has the advantage if you go down the settler route is you get the +1 production as well, which I'll use in this game. I tried to let Rome know what I was doing, but I don't think he realized how quickly I was going to be ready to attack. So he went down, a normal traditional route. I mean, a normal Liberty route of expansion, but not really produce the amount of units. So it's kind of bringing dual tactics to 2v2 and surprising people. I think the most important thing about this is getting optics early because no one really expects it. In this game, you'll see that Germany kind of did expect it a little bit, but unfortunately, or fortunately for me, he wasn't really ticked up. Uh, of the two civs to actually go up against, the Celts and the Germans are pretty good military civs. The Celts, especially with their unique unit, especially on offense. So I really didn't want to give them too much time to build up their armies. So as you can see, I'm building the monument. That's because going down Liberty, you don't get the huge amount of culture that you get if you go down tradition. And I don't plan on being in the game very long, so I don't want to go to tradition first and pop some culture that way. I'd rather just get it the hard way. Also because my partner didn't want to research pottery, I wasn't able to get the granary, so I figured I'll go with that. Here I was kind of stuck with Hobson's choice, so a whole bunch of horrible options, none of which I really wanted to build. I would have preferred to have pottery around now and started to build the granary, even though I don't have any granny specific tiles. So, but the worker works out okay because I can get a pasture on those horses and get some production coming in. Really what I'm trying to do right now is just explore a little bit, find the coast. I didn't go with a scout. Normally I go with a scout. The reason why I didn't go with a scout in this is because you're basically on the same side as your partner and your opponents are on the other side. So any huts are going to be there for a while. And huts, while useful, can give you a huge boost at the start. Probably not as useful as the monument was for me. I mean, unless I lucked out and got a culture hut. So instead I focused on getting the warrior and let Rome do the roaming, as it were. Uh, so, here I am about to unlock. Yeah, first beginner tip for team games: make sure you use two team. It's very useful. Otherwise, everyone knows what you're doing. I'm glad I didn't say, "Hey, what do you think of this rush strategy?" And he come back with, "Oh yeah, we'll definitely rush him and catch him off guard." But fortunately, he put it together and actually played pretty well. The only mistake he really made is a little bit later on, which I'll point that out when we get there. But I think that's all just because he was new to the game. So a good thing about him being new to the game is it shows you that the strategy pretty much works with no help whatsoever. Um, unless your opponent is really prepared, and that is sacrificing their economy to make sure that their defenses are good, um, they're going to be caught off guard. Hopefully this video will bring some awareness to that, so hopefully people will definitely look to defend themselves, especially going up against a Hun. Or again, the Celts are pretty good at rushing like that. Polynesia's pretty awesome, in that you don't even need um, optics, if I remember rightly, with the Māori warrior doing pretty good damage for a warrior unit. Same with the Aztecs, using their warrior rush could work pretty well. The problem with those two, though, is, well, the problem with the Aztec rush is your opponent's probably got archers at least, and probably combos starting to roll out. So it's a little bit hard. Here, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go with get to three population as soon as possible, or go with a production. Probably should have erred on the production and just gone with get the worker out, get the granary out as soon as possible. But you know, wasn't quite perfect. But retrospect's always useful in that. At this point, there's nothing really much to it. I mean, I researched wheel ahead of bronze working. The Huns are great in that they have two unique units that are very easy to get early on and both fantastic for rushing. The wheel gives me the archer, the horse archer, which is a very fast unit. Actually, you could probably do something similar with Egypt, and that would really capture people off guard because no one would be really expecting you to be pumping out chariot archers. Most people will think that you're just going to be wonder whoring. Um, so, that could work. But anyway, for the Huns, the horse archers are really powerful, very quick. Not so good once your opponent has composites, and not so good if your opponent is on a hill with walls. They don't really do that much damage. Fortunately, they're very cheap. You can make a lot of them very quickly. The range strength is 10, so that's pretty good. That's pretty handy. And so the reason why I went the wheel first is I wanted to get some of those archers out to help me explore around a little bit and pop the rest of those ruins. But also, I wanted to have 5 or so horse archers and go over the water. And hopefully, one of my warriors, just by popping a ruin, will turn into a battering ram. Otherwise, I could hard build one, but the battering rams are actually pretty cheap. I think they're a little bit more expensive than the horses, but not much. With 87 gold plus 6, it looks like I'll probably, by the time I'm ready to rush, have enough gold to buy a battering ram anyway. This game, I'm pretty slow. I had a pretty good layout to start off with, but I'm still a little bit slower than what I would ideally like to be. The rush doesn't really get going to around about turn 35, something like that, maybe even in the 40s before I actually attack, which is enough time typically for someone to have 4 comps in defense, which would probably defeat this rush if they're playing defensively. But again, that's the cool thing about this map is a lot of people don't bother because they think, oh, I've got this stream of water protecting me, I'm not going to be in trouble. Or if I am, I'm going to have enough time to respond. So catching your opponent off guard. One of the neat things that a lot of people don't realize is that you can actually use battering rams from the water. And while they take an embarkment penalty of I think like 50% or 25%, they still have their 300% damage So they end up being way better than Trimarines as far as units, and they have the advantage of you can't take them out with a warrior or a scout. So if your opponent has made the mistake of putting his city right on the coast, it can be quite a bit of a laugh. Though I think your units take a lot more damage from archery units, etc., because they're embarked. I'm not 100% sure on that though. I just noticed that whenever I shoot embarked units, you tend to do a lot more damage. Um, I suppose I should really read the Civilpedia on that sometime. Here, I've got my horses going. I want to get the mine going to get some more production, chop the wood and get some units out there quickly. The main difference between this and a normal Hun rush is a normal Hun rush, um, you don't have to worry about investing in optics. You might start building units a little bit earlier, or hopefully you find a hut that upgrades to a battering ram, and you find your opponent's city nearby, and you end up killing their capital in probably turn 7 or 8, which I've done a couple of times now. Yeah, Huns are a luck sieve to start off with. I mean, you can get a very early opponent capital if you're really lucky with your huts. In the similar bucket to Spain in that regard. Spain's a very luck-oriented civ. If you happen to stumble across a wonder within a couple of tiles of your capital, you build a rush by a settler and build that settler right on that wonder and double output, and that's just huge. If it's the Fount of Youth, it's 20 happiness. If it's the Great Barrier Reef, that's 2 tiles with four food, 2 production, and lots of gold, which it just puts you so far ahead. It's not funny. And here you see I was actually lucky and I got a battering ram. Unfortunately, it's also at the other side of the map. Now, one thing when it comes to team games is I don't think you heal faster in your teammates' territory. You do get upgrades such as embarkment. So if you're in friendly territory with a unit that doesn't have the ability to embark, and you have discovered optics, that unit will then have the ability to embark. So what I wanted to do was build a city that's close to the water, so that the units that I had built already that didn't have embarkment, in particular that horse archer and the battering ram below, were able to get that promotion without having to go all the way back to my capital and then back out to the water. This also meant that Rome could upgrade his spearmen and his great general. Another cool thing to use with this tactic is actually to get a settler over to the other side of the map. Especially when combined with a great general, you can really screw someone even if they have a pretty good defense. If you have one of your guys go military tradition, or whatever it is, that gives you the great general, and you go Hun rush, it's going to be pretty dangerous. Here you can see I decided to build a couple of battering rams. Probably what if it wasn't trying to appease Rome for forcing him to rush the technologies I wanted, I probably would have gone horseback riding from here and had Rome actually build horses, because that would be really useful for actually taking the cities. Because the problem with battering rams is while they can do massive damage very quickly, they're also very susceptible to melee attack. So it's nice to have horses or whatever to rush on in there if you were to lose your battering ram at the wrong time. Yeah, here you'll notice that my city's pretty much stagnant at this point. I'm just pumping out horse archers. I'm pumping them out 2 to 3 times, one every 2 to 3 turns, which is going to mean that in the next 10 turns or so, I'm going to have 4 more horse archers, which, is going to be a pretty impressive army this early on. A pretty tough army to deal with anyway. I'd probably attack with less if my opponent was nearby, as opposed to over the river. But again, using that element of surprise really helps. Yeah, I know I'm repeating myself on that one, but it's an important point. Cool. So here, I'm maximizing the tiles that actually have production. A little bit later on, I just get lazy and just upgrade any tile, because I think the game's pretty much won from that point. Um, One of the good things about Rome right now is that his approach is kind of my safety net. But the reality is if you rush and you fail your rush, you're gonna be behind. If they're a good player, you're gonna be behind. So it is a gamble, but it's kind of a fun gamble. It can be quite rewarding when it pays off, and when it doesn't pay off, you might, depending on how far behind you are, you might want to concede, or I prefer to tough it out. Um, yeah, here I'm wanting to get his units up into my territory so they get the optic upgrade because optics is coming in, or embarkment upgrade because optics is coming in a turn. Yeah, they're having the Rock of Gibraltar there is actually kind of cool. Gibraltar, I don't even know what it is. It's the rock with money on it. The rock with money on it is very handy for getting some early cash. However, I don't really use it. The whole point of putting Solid in there was actually just to basically upgrade my units with Embark. I probably could have placed it a little bit differently to maximize production, but it worked out pretty well. I got it up to a 2 population city with the deer, and then just used the hill next to it. So that was getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hammers plus the one from Liberty, 6 hammers for a 2 population city, which was pretty handy. It was able to produce units reasonably quickly, probably about 6 turns I think, for what I wanted to build. Now, it's kind of you have to be careful here in that you want to get your units embarked and ready to go across, but you don't want them to be seen by the opponent. So I'm kind of hedging my bets here and sending a horse archer out. Probably would have been better if I had a scout just to do that, because people will go, oh, he's just sending a scout. He's going to bring a scout into my territory. I'll kill it, type of thing. Or, I don't care about a scout. I'll let it go because I've scouted all my territory. Of those 2 options, always kill a scout, by the way. Even though they might not be able to get any huts because you've got all the huts or whatever, that intelligence that they gain from the scouting is just so useful, knowing where your opponent is. Right now, I have no idea where my opponent is. I know he's not on the south coast, but as far as I know, he could be at the back like we were starting up, or he could be up on the north coast or not. So intelligence is vital. Here I noticed with my horse archer up the top that the shallow tiles don't go across up the top, so only down the bottom. It's kind of random. Some games you end up with east versus west. Some games you end up with just 1 or 2 bridges across, but typically always there's a way to get over to the other side without having to get navigation or whatever it is that allows you to. Not navigation, optics maybe, that allows you to enter in deep ocean squares. Here I am pretty much ready to go over there now. I could probably go over there in the next couple of turns, I think. So I start sending my units ready to go. So typical player right now at 1034, even if they're playing defensively, they've probably got 3 archers maybe. But they're probably indispersed. Though again, because West and East, they would either not have too many archers, or they probably wouldn't disperse them because they know that the attack's only coming from one way. So this attack could be up against 3 archers, 3 horse archers versus 2 normal archers. I think I'd put my money on the maybe actually I would probably put my money on defense, but I had a pretty good feeling that he didn't have any defenses at this point. That was actually a pretty weak mistake. I should have really used F9 at some point, but I was in a hurry. I wanted to rush as quickly as possible and get to recording this video. Here I just needed to find out what his situation was like. So 5 population, that's probably typical at this point. The city walls was definitely a surprise, and city walls on a hill. So that's pretty huge. All of a sudden, I was kind of freaking out. Maybe my rush wouldn't work at all. So I was deciding, do I try and ping it and see what happens or not? I also wanted to get zone of control. So if you don't know what that means, it's basically if an enemy unit is next to your unit, if it's trying to move to another square that's next to a unit of yours, it can only move once. So, for example, these 2 horses in between them, um, actually, if I got the horses over one more square, like if I put that unit on that hill there, um, any units produced in that city, in particular those spearmen, would only have been able to move 1 square, which would be very useful when protecting your battering ram from melee units. Um, so that's why I actually didn't move that melee unit out to that point, because I was scared that he was going to get pinged by the spearmen. I think the spearmen might even be able to take the battering ram out with 1 shot. So. I wasn't quite sure where my second battering ram was, but it was right above me. That was a bit silly. So here, I really wanted to make sure that I either killed that spearman, I was very lucky to get the heal there, or got it in its way so it wasn't able to get to my units. Here I get both my battering rams up close. He has no melee unit, so they're both going to get 2 pings, 2 hits in maybe. 1 hit at least in, which will bring him down to about 50% health. Again, it's only because he's got city walls and on a hill. I mean, if he didn't have city walls and he wasn't on a hill, then it might actually be enough to kill him next turn. You'll see Rome has a melee unit down the bottom there. He was very polite in that you'll see in a few turns he's able to take the city with the spearman, and he should really take the city with the spearman because I have no melee units at that point. Here I am borrowing the fit for the first time from Rome, so that I can buy a battering ram to supplement my melee attack there. You'll notice the Undertaker obviously isn't playing well on a team, so I'm not sure why he would ask me not to attack, to only attack his teammate. Probably a bad idea. So the quality of the opponents here is questionable, but the idea, you know, is valid. I'm not sure I would actually be prepared for this kind of rush in most of these type of games. And I'm pretty weak at the rush. There was one guy I was playing with recently who's very good at it, very quick. I'll see if I can remember his name. Have a look at my friends list. Yeah, Ashtar007, who was a really good vanilla Civ player, but he just took an instant lighting with the Huns. We played a couple of 2v2 games, and I got to build 1 unit in the time that he took to wipe out our opponents both times. The Huns is actually a pretty good Civ not to rush with as well, especially if you get horses in your capital, because you tend to outproduce most people for some of the early wonders. Here I'm taking out that melee unit as quickly as possible because I don't want it to take out my battering ram. And it's the only problem with battering rams, and it's the only balancing factor with battering rams, is that they're very susceptible to melee attack. Not so much archery, so you definitely, if you're getting attacks by battering rams or see them on the horizon, make sure you have melee units. Here I decided to see if Rome would lend me some more money, and if so, I bought another unit. I didn't really need it in the end, but better to be safe than sorry at this point. A warriors. I probably would have bought a horse if we had horses at that point, or I would have produced a couple of horses by now. Here, so here, as I was saying, Rome's been polite with the spearmen, and I say, tell him to take the city. He's like, no, you did all the work, and I'm like, but I have no melee unit, so Rome just sits there, and the timer runs out. So instead of a turn 42 take of the tech capital, it turns into a little bit longer, unfortunately. And by the time I should have been a little bit more explicit with my message, but I had some upgrades, etc. So by the time he actually gets back to me and says, no, 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 I don't want to take it, it's your fight, here you go. I don't have enough time to tell him I don't have any melee units. So the fight goes on. And I think I'll just keep this video rolling till we actually take Berlin, but I probably won't bother continue after that. It's pretty straightforward. I go down to the Salts, they're a little bit lower than Berlin. They're pretty easy to take out. I'll probably just keep the video on it, but I won't comment on it. It's pretty straightforward from that point there. So yeah, so it's just another tactic. You know, it's the thing I really like about it is that it completely takes people off guard. No one's really expecting you to cross that chasm of water this early on. It works for 3 versus 3 as well. 3 versus 3 typically has these kind of coastal bridges. Any bigger than that, I think the river probably gets too wide and you can't do it anymore, and so you do actually need to research all the way to frigates. Yeah, there we go. Turn 44. It's a little bit slow, but you get the general idea, and I'm sure you guys can improve on it. And if you do have any ways to improve on it, let me know via the chat. Well, okay, well, I hope you guys found this all informative. I'll leave the video running to the end of the match, but I think this is where I'll sign out. As always, any comments, any complaints, well, I'm going to ignore the complaints, but any comments or compliments, you know, feel free to leave those. Thanks.